Hello, very good afternoon to all of you. So the link that I have put up in the chat box is of Urek Alert. I don't know how many of you know about Urek Alert. Uh, Urek Alert is a site of uh, publishing the current research findings uh, in the field of science. And when I say in the field of science, it would include all fields, including physical, chemical sciences, geographical sciences, and even biological sciences. So it's basically a site where they come out with media or press releases where the universities give statements about the current research that has been published. And there are a lot of insights about what that research is all about and what's the way ahead. And most of these articles are, penned up like a newspaper article, wherein common masses should be able to understand as to what kind of research is going on and what the finding has been, where it has been published. And also, they normally provide the link to the paper. Uh, Maybe even at times they provide the link to the university website from which you get the paper. So it's a very interesting website, which is normally utilized as a source of information by several scientific news writers. And I think that it would be a great help for you to keep in touch with what kind of research is going out there. And there are plethora of articles that go in every single day. So as I am teaching literature review to the part one, uh, I am trying to, bring in all possible sources of what, or rather from where you could get maximum kind of information. So we have formed in a group wherein we see to it that we discuss two research publications per day so that they understand as to how to read out research papers and how to interpret as to what they have been trying to do. So I thought, why not share the link with you guys, probably the areas that you are interested in and the kind of research that is going on in those specific areas. You might find it pretty interesting. So surely peek into the website and just if you come across some really good articles, do share it with each other, do share it with me, and we could have good discussions over it. Okay, so then shall we begin with today's discussion? All set? I'm sharing the PPT. Let me know if it's visible to you all, and then we can start. Okay, great. I hope I'm audible enough, and I'm trying to be a little soft because I'm not keeping well, but I'm hoping that you're able to hear me out clearly there. Okay, great, amazing. So let's start with the approaches for SGT. SGT is nothing but somatic gene therapy, so don't get afraid looking at the abbreviation. It's nothing but somatic cell gene therapy. That's what we call as SGT. And as I told you yesterday, that germline, gene therapy is something that people will be very skeptical about. And skeptical for a basic reason that uh, we have already discussed that there are a lot of ethical issues and there could also be some complications in the growth and development of that individual. So in that case, maximum of the gene therapy incidences that have been occurred till date, they have been related to somatic cells. Now, there are two different ways in which you could carry out gene therapy. Number one is an ex vivo approach. Now, what is an ex vivo approach? Ex vivo, this word itself means that it's going to be outside the body of the host, it's going to be outside the system of the host. So, what am I going to do? I am going to remove the target cells and I'm going to culture them first in the lab. Okay, so I'm going to cultivate the cells in the lab, and post which We are going to introduce the genes of interest into these target cells and transplant these cells back into the host. So I've removed the cells from the host, I have cultivated it, I've introduced the gene of interest into these cells, and I'm putting it back into the host, right? Now, obviously, this can be performed only in those circumstances where removing the cells is possible. I mean, it should be accessible, right? So the ease of removal is the first criteria to decide if you would go for ex vivo approach or not. And obviously, these should be those kind of cells which have a long life, okay? And in a way, is long life in the sense it doesn't mean throughout the life, but once introduced, there should be some time for these cells to multiply and pass on that gene of interest to the future cells. So skin and liver cells. When you talk about skin cells, I'm sure that you have heard this term called fibroblasts, right? So skin and liver cells is something which is very commonly used in this kind of an approach. And obviously, because you are taking the cells from the host itself and transplanting it back into them, there is no chance of rejection. Because normally, whenever we do some kind of a transplantation, the first question that comes in front of us is this transplant going to be accepted, right? So because we are taking out the cells from the host itself and transplanting it back into the same host, we really need not worry about it because there's going to be no rejection, there's going to be no immunological reaction, and the graft is going to be successfully accepted, right? So that's the ex vivo approach. Now, I remember that when I was discussing it last year, I had this question from one of the students that why do we use the term ex vivo? Why not use the term in vitro? Do you understand the question? The question is very interesting. Why do you use the term ex vivo and why not use the term in vitro? Because till now we have been very commonly discussing terms like in vitro and in vivo, right? So in vivo, which means it takes place inside the host, and in vitro means it takes place outside the host. But please understand that in this particular approach, if you see, you are not just removing cells, but you are trying to keep them alive, you're trying to keep them viable, and you're trying to insert something into that cell. Okay, so still you are working inside a living system, and after the process is done, you are re-implanting it into the host, back into the host. Okay, while in vitro approach initially was an idea wherein they used to say that they should be cell-free systems. Okay, it's a different story that post that they started even working with human cells because the term in vitro fertilization came from that basic aspect that you could have two gametes and you could fuse them. Okay, but here you are not just removing the cells and culturing them, but you are modifying them externally outside the system and then you are transplanting it back. And that's the reason why they have used the term ex vivo, because still you are working with live cells while you are modifying those live cells. That doesn't happen in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization, you're just getting those two cells in contact and the natural process then continues. But here there is a modification that you are working out with the live cells because of which they use this term ex vivo. So obviously this is going to be an expensive process and you should know why, because you are removing the cells of the host, you're modifying it, you're putting it back into them. So I have to do this for every single patient. So that's going to be time consuming, that's going to be very expensive because it's going to be like a tailor-made therapy for every individual that walks in, right? Now, you need to understand that you could do the same process with universal donor cells, okay, which are modified in such a way that they have no immunological response. So you have to just insert those cells into every patient because they are universally modified cells. But obviously, let me tell you that this is not a fact that there is going to be no immunological response at all in every single individual. ऐसा नहीं होता है क्योंकि हर एक का इम्यूनिटी बहुत ही डिफरेंट है. कुछ लोगों में अगर इम्यूनोलॉजिकल रिस्पॉन्स ना भी हो तो किसी और में इम्यूनोलॉजिकल रिस्पॉन्स होने के चांसेस बहुत ज़्यादा होते हैं, राइट? So you cannot consider it to be a foolproof method or a foolproof technique. It doesn't just work like that. And obviously, whenever you're doing this kind of a therapy, you would want persistent expression. You want the gene to be expressed whenever it is needed, because if it doesn't happen like that, then the whole process is a waste of time. So a persistent expression is going to be very much essential. The second is obviously working with a live host and not with their cells, wherein you're trying to introduce the gene of interest into the cells inside the host body. Okay, so obviously you will have to make use of vectors to do this, because you want the gene to be delivered to a specific cell of the host. So you will make use of vectors over here. Though, they say that very little progress has been done, but it's a phenomenal kind of work wherein people have worked on all different kinds of vectors that you could make use of to bring about this kind of a gene therapy. Obviously, this includes viral vectors, right? And it also includes liposomes, which we will be discussing very shortly. So you could have several kinds of cellular targets. You could have liver cells, you could have pancreatic cells, you could have intestinal cells, you could have even at times the nervous system cells. Okay, so cellular targets could vary. So in those circumstances, it becomes very much essential for us to know which vectors would work, because the target could be lymphocytes, could be fibroblasts, could be liver cells, could be neurons. So I need to know that which vector would work the best to deliver the gene of interest to that specific target cell only and not to anyone else. The accurate delivery is a big concern. Okay. Now, you could use microinjection technique. Microinjection technique is a very crucial technique, which you had seen, if you remember. I think we had seen this technique when I had shown you that video wherein they were removing a single cell from the embryo. Do you remember? जहाँ पर एक पाइपेट से वो ग्रोइंग एम्ब्रियो को होल्ड किया जा रहा था और उसमें से एक सेल निकाला जा रहा था फॉर एनालिसिस. Do you remember that? The similar microinjection or microsurgery based techniques could be used. Calcium phosphate mediated transfer could be used. Liposuction, which means using liposomes to deliver the gene of interest, could be used. So whenever you use liposomes to deliver the gene of interest, you are going to use the term liposuction. Please remember that. Okay, you could also make use of viral vectors. So it depends on what kind of an approach you want to make use of when you are carrying out this particular technique. Now, for micro injection, you had seen that it's not an easy technique at all. वो YouTube वीडियो में दिखाई दे रहा था कि it needs a lot of expertise, it needs a lot of skill. So you need to have trained experts who could do this kind of a technique in the lab. While if you make use of viral vectors and if you are ensuring that the virulent part of the virus is removed from its DNA, then obviously it's not going to cause any harm, it's not going to cause an infection, and it's safe to use. Okay, but you have to ensure that the viral vectors are safe. Otherwise, in the process of curing some kind of a genetic disorder, you could give them some kind of a very serious and severe infection. Right now, different kinds of viruses have been tried out as vectors, including tumor viruses which have DNA as their genetic material, which include the simian virus, the polyoma virus, the papilloma viruses, also the retroviruses, which have RNA as their genetic material, including the murine and avian leukemia and sarcoma viruses have been used. Let me also tell you that HIV, which belongs to the family of lentiviruses, even that has been tried out to be used as a viral vector. Not HIV, but the family of lentiviruses. Okay, because several kinds of viruses have been evaluated for their efficacy when it comes to delivery of the gene of interest. So to begin with, we have retroviruses first, very much well known for the efficient transfer of the gene of interest. Also, if you have modified the genome in such a way that all virulence factors genes are silenced, then there is no metabolic damage or genetic damage that is caused. Okay. It also ensures a stable expression of the inserted gene. And the best part is that retroviruses have been studied for so long now that the mechanisms of infection, the way they do gene transfer, the way they integrate the gene into the host genome, and how they would express and control the expression, all of these factors are well known. See, whenever you use a viral vector for the process of introducing a gene in the process of gene therapy, it's very much essential that you know everything about that vector, because until and unless you know that vector in and out, using that is not really a good idea. Because even in terms of safety, I should know that is there a chance, even if I silence their genes of virulence, is there a chance that they would revert back to their wild type? So do I have to knock out those genes rather than just silencing them? So I have to have a complete picture. I need to have a complete idea about the vector that I'm making use of in this kind of a study, right? And that vector is going to be the best vector which has an efficient mode of transfer of gene without causing or without compromising on the safety aspect. Okay. Now, in the family of retroviruses, we have types of retroviruses which infect variety of cells. Okay, which means that I may have retroviruses infecting liver cells, I may have specific retroviruses infecting the pancreatic cells, and so on. So that gives me a good option, because I can use this family of viruses to uh, transfer the gene of interest to a variety of target cells. So that is very much interesting. Okay, and no doubt that the in vitro transfer, which means that if you're going to remove the cells, which the book itself has referred to as ex vivo earlier, it's highly efficient, but in vivo may not be that efficient. Okay, it may be inefficient. It has been tried out in vivo. In some cases, there is success. In some cases, the success rate is very low. अभी एक्स वीवो अप्रोच में ना क्या फायदा होता है? एक्स वीवो अप्रोच में ये फायदा होता है कि ट्रांसफर होने के बाद आप पहले चेक कर सकते हो कि भाई सच्ची में ट्रांसफर हुआ है या नहीं हुआ है. ओके, एक्सप्रेशन हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा है, ये इंश्योर करने के बाद आप उन सिलेक्टेड सेल्स को ट्रांसफर कर सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर मैं ये पूरा प्रोसेस एक एनिमल सिस्टम के अंदर कैरी आउट करने वाला हूँ, तो मेरे पास ये ऑप्शन नहीं होगा कि मैं इंश्योर कर सकूँ कि हाँ भाई हुआ ही है. मतलब ऑब्वियसली आई कैन टेस्ट इट, बट आई कैन नॉट डू मच अबाउट इट इफ द ट्रांसफर हैज फेल्ड, right? So that is the biggest problem when it comes to the in vivo approach. Okay. Now, when you talk about, just give me a minute. Okay. So it's going to be very important to also know that what is the exact mechanism by which these viruses would enter the cell and it would integrate the gene of interest into the host genome. Okay, so their process of infection and integration should be known. Also, you should know that is the virus having some kind of specificity in terms of it will infect only actively multiplying cells and it will not infect the cells which are not in multiplication stages. वो आइडिया भी होना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि अगर ऐसा है जैसे कि रेट्रोवायरसेस के केस में ऐसा है कि they have a requirement कि cell has to be actively divided, only then it will be able to infect those host cells and integrate the gene of interest. So agar aisa hai, then obviously I cannot use these viruses as vectors if my target cells are neurons or if my target cells are liver cells, okay, or any kind of differentiated cells जिनका अभी replication ability नहीं है, तो ऐसे cells के लिए इनका इस्तेमाल करना impossible है. And neurons के case में you very well know that they don't multiply, right? So we have to understand that then obviously I cannot use retroviruses in this aspect. Do you know which other cells other than neurons and hepatocytes, which other cells do you know of which do not multiply, or rather you can say that they don't multiply at a faster rate, because hepatocytes do multiply but their division rate is very slow. Neurons के case में they don't multiply. Do you know of any other human cells which have the ability of multiplication, but it is dead slow? Are you aware of it? Any one of you? Pancreatic cells? Mm, not really. Heart cells. Okay. Princy, what do you mean by heart cells? ऐसे कोई cells है क्या मतलब heart cells? Which part of heart are you talking about? You could be very close to the answer actually. The cardiac muscle cells, the myofibrils. Myofibrils are the ones which make the cardiac muscle cells. So the cardiac muscle cells, uh, they do not have a good replication rate. They do not multiply faster. And that is the basic reason why any kind of healing uh, to the cardiac muscle is trickier. It's difficult. Okay. So they are of the category wherein multiplication rate is going to be quite slow. Okay. So obviously when you talk about transduction or transfection process wherein you want to integrate the gene of interest into the patient, there are several disadvantages. लेक्चर चल रहा है बोलो उनको हाँ उनको बोलो लेक्चर चालू है okay sorry also differential regulation is something that matters a lot which means जहाँ पे भी ये gene of interest जाके integrate हुआ है uh, it is very important for us to know what kind of regulation applies over there, whether the protein is expressing itself intermittently or it is under tight regulation, is it under loose regulation, that has to be identified. Okay, and after the insertion, is it affecting the process of regulation of adjacent genes in any way? Okay, is the regulation becoming abnormal? All this has to be studied. Because as I said earlier, I think yesterday itself we discussed that in several circumstances, when the insertion takes place, it disrupts the active cells. Okay, it could also lead to malignancy. It could lead to tumor formation. Okay, now please understand that this all makes us realize that it is very much essential that we do or we carry out a targeted transduction process. What is the targeted transduction process? Such that the gene of interest is inserted at a specific site only and not anywhere else. Okay, that could be with a simple process of homologous recombination, wherein your gene of interest is flanked by some complementary sequences. So you know that recombination is taking place at a specific site only. If this can be done effectively, then obviously the fear of disrupting the other active genes, the other functional genes, or leading to malignancy or giving rise to any other complication is overcome, right? So now we are talking about few vectors like the HSV1. You know what HSV now is, right? So I'm not going to get into it. So it establishes a latent infection. We know that very well. Okay, it establishes a lifelong infection, and in several cases, it has been found that it establishes a non-cytopathic infection in neurons of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. More importantly, it has no oncogene or transforming sequences. Okay, in several cases, the disadvantage could be that they, actively do not integrate into the host genome, and basically they can be developed in such a way that they remain in the latent phase and do not come into the lytic phase. So you could silence specific genes for that, and you could basically insert your gene of interest into these vectors because manipulation is pretty much easy as the entire HSV sequence is known to us. The sequencing is done, so you know where exactly you can insert your gene of interest, and you could use this as an active vector. As far as adenoviruses are concerned, they also have a variety of target cells. Adenoviruses have been very, very popular for high-level protein production. So they have been utilized, their promoters also have been utilized on a large scale for increasing or enhancing the expression of specific proteins. Okay, the best part is that they overcome the disadvantage or limitation that we had in case of retroviruses, wherein they are able to transfer genes even in absence of cell division, which means that you do not need replicated or cells which are in the process of replication or the cells which are in the process of cell division. So if you want to bring about genetic modifications, if you want to bring about gene therapy in cells which do not actively multiply, you very well know that adenoviruses should be your target. Okay, and most commonly with adenoviruses, the GFP protein has been used as a marker protein so as to identify if the gene therapy has been successfully carried out or not. Now, what are the limitations of viral vectors? So it's not just about one virus, but it's about the whole, you know, variety of viral vectors that you have. First, several viral vectors pose size restrictions, which means that which vector would have the capability of carrying how long of a gene fragment that needs to be known, because you cannot insert very long gene fragments into it. Also, many a times these viral vectors, they inactivate the expression after the integration is done, and that could be disastrous because the whole mehnat would fall apart. There could be random integration that's carried out, which means that the gene could be integrated anywhere onto the genome, which is uh, dangerous. And because they are viruses, if the host immune system is quite active, there could be immune response that is elicited, and that could be really worse. So unwanted immune response is the another disadvantage. So people have also tried out an alternative to viral vectors, which is lipofection, where you're making use of liposomes. But before we go into liposomes, it's very important for me to understand whether you know about liposomes and you know about Michel. So what is the difference? If anyone is going to ask you that what is the difference between a Michel and a liposome, how would you differentiate? Can you tell me that? What is the difference between Michel and liposomes? Amazing, very good. So Michels have a single layer of the lipid, while liposomes have the bilayer, right? Very good. So liposomes could be anywhere between 50 to 200 nanometers in size. And normally, these cationic lipases, they are mixed with DNA solution. And overall, they are positively charged complexes, and they are purposefully given that positive charge for a basic reason that they could very easily fuse with negatively charged cell surfaces, right? Normally, they are seen to have a very good efficiency, okay, and it's also seen that if you are putting in an entire fragment which could replicate and which could express itself without getting integrated into the host system, you could also express that gene of interest extra chromosomally, right? And the biggest issue with the liposome is its creation and its stability. A lot of stability study needs to be performed because you very well know that the condition in the human body at different sites is very different. Okay, so in those environmental conditions, in that niche, whether the liposome remains stable or not, this becomes extremely important. So that kind of study, stability study, is what is going to take a lot of time and money when you talk about liposomes. Okay. There is no limitation on the size of DNA fragment that you could introduce. Okay, you also can infect majority or rather transfect majority of the types of cells using liposomes. So that is also not an issue. And there is no specific need of replicating cells. And there is also lack of immunogenicity, which means that it's not going to elicit a immune response. Now, when you talk about its ability to transfect wide variety of cells, we also need to understand over here that there needs to be some markers in the liposome which makes the liposome go and bind to specific cells only. Okay, otherwise अंधाधुंध कोई भी किसी भी सेल को जाके वो ट्रांसफेक्ट करेगा तो वो भी नहीं चलेगा. There has to be some markers that you introduce while constructing the liposomes such that they maintain that specificity of going and merging with specific kind of cells only. Yes, Isha, I saw the comment in the chat box that indeed there could be reverse Michels also. And reverse Michels basically would work when you try to form the Michel in a hydrophobic condition. And you are trying to trap in something which is hydrophilic. So the heads will be facing inside and the tails will be facing outside. Yes, indeed. Michels also are not immunogenic. It's not going to be immunogenic in any way because ultimately the composition of both Michels and liposomes could be quite similar. They are not going to be immunogenic, but because they are monolayers, they have a lower stability, Mansi. That's the basic reason why people prefer using liposomes over Michels. Stability is a big issue in case of Michels. Disrupting them is quite easy. That's not the case when you talk about a bilayer. Bilayer are more sturdier than the Michels. Okay? Let's go to the targets. So there are several target cells that have been taken into consideration. First and foremost is bone marrow. So what do you know about bone marrow? Where is bone marrow present? Location. ये नहीं बोलना हाँ sir, bones. Anyone? No one. Very good. So your limb bones and your hip bones, basically hip and thigh bones are the ones which have bone marrows. It's a spongy tissue, right? And bone marrow is of two types basically. You have red bone marrow and you have yellow bone marrow, if you know. Red bone marrow is the site for hematopoiesis. It's the site for production of blood. So obviously maturation is a different aspect, as I can see you are posting in the chat box, but we know that the preliminary function is hematopoiesis, that is formation of blood. So it is readily accessible and they contain stem cells, totipotent stem cells, which after a point of time turn into pluripotent because they can form specific types of cells, blood cells. And in case of thalassemia and sickle cell anemia, this is going to be the best target, right? Also in case of tissue-specific disorders like phenylketonuria, also this could be a good target. They could be difficult to culture in the lab, though bone marrow is accessible, but isolating the cell out of it and then, culturing it could be slightly difficult. Even though certain disorders may not be directly related to the bone marrow, but you could insert the gene in the bone marrow cells because ultimately blood formation is taking place there. So it's easy to put in the product into circulation. So that's why even if it may not be related directly to the blood or to the bone marrow, you will see that several disorders are treated by carrying out gene therapy of the bone marrow cells. Okay. The next is hepatocytes. the liver cells. Again, a difficult target, but important one because most of the metabolic and synthesis functions are carried out by the liver cells. The manipulation is not very easy. They have been found to be relatively resistant to retroviral infections. It becomes difficult to provide the gene of interest or deliver the gene of interest into them, right? Also for conditions like hypercholesterolemia, which is high cholesterol levels, uh, which is familiar, which means that it runs in the family, that could be treated using gene therapy on hepatic cells. Fibroblasts, again, skin cells, very easily harvested, grown, and transformed. You could use retroviruses as your vectors. Okay, for secretion of specific proteins, hormones, providing essential nutrients, clearance of soluble metabolites, fibroblasts is the best target. Okay, and also it can be ensured that the gene product which is produced, it could be secreted out into the blood. And also because of this, the fear of delivering the product to a site very far away, which may not be accessible, gets solved because they could deliver the product that they secrete into the blood. And also, a testing has been done wherein human blood clotting factor 9 has been inserted in the skin fibroblast in the mouse. Obviously, this will help to treat hemophilia because now the clotting factor would be expressed. Other than that, also other epithelial and endothelial cells which line your blood vessels, intestine, pancreatic ducts, bile ducts, these could be the sources. They are readily accessible, easy to grow in the lab. Okay. Also, in case of cystic fibrosis, you could get epithelial cells from the lungs, which we call as pulmonary epithelial cells. So they could be utilized for gene therapy. And in case of endocrine cells, uh, you could use them for hormonal conditions specifically. So if there are metabolic deficiency states or endocrinal conditions wherein hormone is not being synthesized effectively, then this could be your proper target. Retroviruses will not be able to infect them, so you have to think of viral vectors or liposuction, which can act on non-dividing cells. And pancreatic cells and adrenocortical cells are the ones which are being tested out on a large scale because there's a condition called as pancreatic exocrine insufficiency, wherein digestive enzymes are not secreted effectively because of genetic defects, because of defective genes. So in this condition, they are provided all the digestive enzymes orally. You have to take it before they have their food so that digestion could be carried out effectively. Also, in case of diabetes, the pancreatic cells are involved. In case of glucagon, also pancreatic cells are involved. So, there is a lot of scope in terms of gene therapy in the pancreas. So, it is being tried out to a great extent. Also, neurons could be a target, though there are several hurdles. And once they are differentiated, it becomes very difficult to modify anything in it. And it's also a riskier site to work on because if anything goes wrong, it could be disastrous. Though people have been trying out using recombinant HSV as a vector, so you can see that they have been trying out to deliver hypoxanthine phosphoribosyltransferase transferase gene in rat neuronal cells, and they have been successfully able to do it. But bringing this to humans is going to take a long period of time. Okay, so trial and errors are on with animals, and they are trying to see if it works effectively before they put it to human practice. Also, you could modify the smooth muscle cells with the blood vessel walls, the endothelial lining, which is in close contact with the circulatory system. And this is the best target if you want to deliver something into the blood directly. Because whatever is secreted by them, that's going to be directly released into the blood, right? So if you want some protein to be expressed in the blood, this is the best site for modification. So that's about all different types of cellular targets. And we will speak about in vivo gene transfer tomorrow in our next session because I have a meeting to attend. So I will have to stop over here. But if you have any questions till this point, please feel free to ask. so we can clarify your questions before we start.